So let's talk about the moment that just delivered one of the most brutal surgical political executions in modern American history. In a staggering reversal of political gravity, Vice President J.D. transformed what should have been a routine Senate valedictory into the final inescapable graveyard of Hillary Clinton's 40-year empire. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee room was engineered to be a monument to the Washington establishment, polished mahogany, institutional reverence, the kind of place where Hillary Rodham Clinton had always reigned supreme. She arrived expecting a victory lap, a final televised showcase of her unmatched diplomatic gravitas before a deferential audience. But the very architecture of the chamber betrayed the shifting tectonic plates of American power before a single microphone even went live. Down below, seated at the witness table, was the woman who had navigated the Situation Room and treated the West Wing as her personal birthright. High above her, staring down from the elevated dais in his constitutional capacity as President of the Senate, sat Vice President J.D. Vance. It was a visceral, unprecedented dichotomy. The ultimate political aristocrat forced to crane her neck upward at a man from the rusted-out ruins of Middletown, Ohio, a man representing the exact forgotten demographic she had once publicly discarded as irredeemable. When Clinton launched her opening salvo, it was a chilling masterclass in bureaucratic demolition. For 7 grueling minutes, she weaponized the practiced melodic condescension taught only in the halls of Wellesley. Mr. Vice President, she began, her voice dripping with faux concern, casually dropping the names of Joe Biden and Al Gore to remind the room of her impeccable pedigree. Then her tone hardened into a spear aimed directly at the dais. You wrote a memoir about growing up in poverty, but a compelling story is not a qualification. You've been in government for less time than some of my interns. Pausing for the cameras, fully aware her next words were destined for every cable news chyron, she delivered what she believed was the killing blow. With respect, being from Appalachia doesn't make you a foreign policy expert any more than being from Chappaqua makes me a coal miner. You are a deplorable in a nice suit, and a nice suit doesn't change what's underneath. She leaned back into her heavy leather chair with the cold composure of an apex predator who had just claimed another victim, basking in the deliberate applause of her allies, entirely oblivious to the trap that was about to violently snap shut. Yet in the eye of this manufactured televised storm, Vance remained extraordinarily still. He absorbed the kinetic energy of the room without projecting a single ounce of vulnerability. He did not flinch. He did not adjust his posture. He did not rush to the microphone. He sat exactly as he always did during these high-stakes hearings, relaxed, almost casually draped in his chair, projecting the impenetrable body language of a man forged in a community where telegraphing your emotional state was a luxury desperate people could not afford. As the partisan applause gradually bled out into the high ceilings of the chamber, Vance let a profound, suffocating 3-second silence descend upon the room. It was not a theatrical pause for the cameras. It was the deliberate, unhurried calculation of a man who viewed words as finite currency, a man who had learned early in Middletown that you never spend them recklessly. Then came the smile. That slight, warm, disarming Midwest nice expression that anyone who had watched him debate would instantly recognize. A smile that looked like polite deference but concealed a surgical, lethal edge. Madam Secretary, thank you, his voice rolled out, smooth and conversational. You covered a lot of ground. My background, my qualifications, my suit. His right hand rose slowly, fingers lightly brushing the fabric of his tie. This is actually my second nice suit. My first one I bought at Goodwill for $12 for a job interview my senior year. I remember the exact price because I counted the money 3 times before I paid. Where I come from, $12 was a decision. $12 meant something else you couldn't buy that week. The atmosphere in the room seemed to contract. The air grew suddenly dense as he began dismantling her Wellesley-honed insult with bare-knuckled Appalachian reality. You said being from Appalachia doesn't make me a foreign policy expert. You're right. What makes me qualified is the vice presidency. I didn't inherit it. I earned it, each step from the bottom. He leaned forward slightly, the casual tone giving way to an inescapable gravitational pull that commanded absolute silence. But you're also right about something else, Madam Secretary. I am deplorable, or at least that's what you called people like me. He let the heavy, ugly word hang suspended in the pristine air, forcing everyone to look at it. You called my community, coal miners, veterans, factory workers, people who pray and own guns and work with their hands, a basket of deplorables. You said it at a fundraiser with Barbara Streisand at a party that cost more per plate than my grandmother made in a month. So yes, I'm deplorable. I've been deplorable my whole life. The difference between 2016 and today is that the deplorable is sitting up here and you're sitting down there. Now let's talk about your record. With agonizing slowness, Vance reached out and opened a standard, unembossed manila folder, a cheap piece of stationery that looked entirely alien amidst the polished wood and brass. When he began to speak again, his voice was maddeningly unhurried, adopting the cadence of a man calmly explaining the terms of a surrender over a cup of black diner coffee. Madam Secretary, you used the word deplorable at a fundraiser in 2016. I want to put it in context, not your context, but the context of the people you were talking about. He painted the scene of that September 9th, 2016 LGBT fundraiser at Cipriani in New York City with brutal precision. Ticket prices from $1,200 to $250,000 per table, a room overflowing with donors whose collective net worth dwarfed the GDP of entire counties back in his home state. From that room, surrounded by that wealth, you said you could put half of Trump's supporters into what you called the basket of deplorables: racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic. My grandmother, the woman who raised me while my mother was in rehab, voted for Donald Trump. She was a high school graduate who worked in Armco Steel until her body gave out. She went to church on Sundays. She owned a gun because the neighborhood wasn't safe and the police took 20 minutes to arrive. She worried about the factory closing and the pills coming in. And according to you, she was deplorable, irredeemable. You wrote off my grandmother from a fundraiser that cost more than her annual income. He turned a single page. March 2016, CNN Town Hall. You said, and this is a direct quote, "We're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business." You said it on national television to the faces of people whose families had been mining coal for generations. People who went underground every morning not knowing if they'd come back up. People whose lungs turned black so America could keep the lights on. Vance's voice dipped, carrying the authentic bruising weight of witnessed grief. I grew up with those families. I played with their kids. I ate dinner at their tables. I saw what happened when the plants closed and the mines shut down. First, the jobs disappeared, then the hope, then the opioids arrived, then the funerals. And earlier, in 1996, before you called working class white Americans deplorable, you called young black Americans super predators. Your exact words, "We need to bring them to heel." The language of dog training applied to black teenagers. 3 quotes, 3 different groups of Americans. Same woman, same tone, same fundraiser circuits where the champagne costs more than a month's rent in Middletown. This isn't a gaffe. 1 quote is a gaffe. 2 quotes is a pattern. 3 quotes spanning 20 years is a worldview. And that worldview is that people who don't look like your donors, don't talk like your donors, and don't write checks like your donors are something less than fully human. Where I come from, we call that snobbery. But your snobbery didn't just hurt feelings, it destroyed communities. The coal communities you promised to shut down, they shut down. The opioid crisis that filled the vacuum, it filled it. The funerals I attended as a teenager for kids my age, those funerals happened. My grandmother saw it coming. She died before she could see me become vice president, but she lived long enough to know the woman calling her irredeemable had never once set foot in Middletown, Ohio. Down at the witness table, Clinton's face remained frozen in her signature political smile. But the smile was noticeably tighter now. It was the strained mechanical expression of a titan who had survived every apex predator in Washington, only to find herself bleeding out from a devastating hyper-personal vivisection administered by a man forged in the very ruins she had mockingly dismissed. Madam Secretary, let's discuss classified information. Vance's tone underwent a chilling metamorphosis. The Midwestern storytelling warmth evaporated, replaced by the rigid cadence of a man who had served in the United States Marine Corps. I handled classified material during my service, not at your level, but the rules are the same. Actually, they're stricter for enlisted personnel because we don't have high-priced lawyers and elite connections to explain away fatal mistakes. So let me ask you this from the perspective of every service member who has ever handled classified intelligence. If a Lance Corporal took classified documents home, stored them on a personal server accessible to anyone with basic hacking skills, deleted 33,000 of them with military-grade BleachBit software, and laughed about wiping the server with a cloth or something, what would happen to him? Vance paused, letting the grim reality hang like an executioner's blade. He would be court-martialed, dishonorable discharge, hard time at Fort Leavenworth. I knew Marines disciplined for far less.
Now let's talk about what you did. You maintained a private email server in your basement in Chappaqua. You sent and received classified information, including material at the highest levels. You deleted 33,000 emails. Your staff used BleachBit. FBI Director James Comey called it extremely careless. Hostile actors likely accessed it, yet no charges. A Lance Corporal who did what you did would be in prison right now. So what is the difference between that Lance Corporal and you? From where I sit in Middletown, Ohio, the only difference I can identify is the last name. Clinton slowly removed her glasses, cleaned them meticulously, and took a long sip of water, 5 agonizing seconds of engineered delay. Vance continued, voice dropping back into that lethal storytelling register. Madam Secretary, let's discuss Haiti. After the 2010 earthquake that killed up to 300,000 people, the United States alone dispersed $4.40 billion. Your husband co-chaired the Recovery Commission. The Clinton Foundation raised tens of millions. You oversaw the contracts. A 2025 DOJ audit revealed the brutal truth. Less than 2% of contracts went to Haitian companies. 56% went to firms near Washington, D.C. The Caracol Industrial Park promised 100,000 jobs and delivered 5,479. The $90 million housing program built exactly 6 permanent homes. 6 homes. While people lived in squalid tent cities, the Clinton Foundation invested in a $200 a night luxury hotel with designer purses and hardwood floors. Vance looked straight at her. Where I come from, taking money meant for disaster relief and building a luxury hotel isn't called charity, it's called a grift. The only difference between the grifts in Middletown and the grifts in Haiti is the number of zeros and the quality of the champagne. Clinton's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water again. Vance's voice dropped even lower, into the reverent register reserved for the fallen. Madam Secretary, I need to discuss Benghazi. He named every one of the 4 Americans who died, Ambassador Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Doherty. He detailed the over 600 ignored security requests. He described the 13-hour battle. He told how Tyrone Woods defied orders, painted the enemy with a laser designator on that rooftop for hours, waiting for air support that never came. And when you were asked under oath why the American people were lied to about a YouTube video, you responded, "What difference at this point does it make?" Vance closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. It makes the difference between a military that trusts its leadership and one that realizes it is entirely alone. You broke the sacred contract of leave no man behind. 4 families had closed casket funerals because of it. One final section tied everything together, the Steele dossier. Vance laid out how her campaign funded the fabricated opposition research that led to the Russia collusion hoax, the FISA abuse, the Durham report, and how she later called Tulsi Gabbard a Russian asset with zero evidence. This isn't a career of public service. This is a sociopathic pattern. Ordinary working-class Americans pay the devastating price in blood, jobs, and ruined lives, while you move on to the next elite fundraiser. Clinton tried to respond. The legendary pivot machine that had worked for 40 years suddenly failed. The words wouldn't come. For long, agonizing seconds, she sat frozen, microphone live, cameras rolling, producing nothing but hollow silence. The most powerful woman in American political history, trapped by her own unspinnable record. Vance calmly buttoned his jacket. I grew up deplorable. I'm still deplorable. The only thing that changed is the view.
He nodded respectfully to the chairman and walked out, unhurried, grounded, the steady walk of a man who had been underestimated his entire life. Within hours, 3 clips went viral simultaneously and fractured the digital landscape. The deplorable is sitting up here, the Lance Corporal question that every veteran felt in their bones, and the devastating shorthand, 6 homes. The institutional consequences came fast. The DOJ reopened reviews. Speaking fees plummeted. Golden invitations vanished. The word deplorable was transformed from an insult into unbreakable armor for millions. This was not just a hearing. This was a historic collision of two Americas. The elite politician who hoarded secrets and charged $250,000 for speeches, left utterly speechless by a Marine from a rusted-out trailer who brought the receipts straight to the Senate dais. 40 years of absolute power shattered by 10 seconds of crushing silence. Now tell me in the comments, what moment hit you the hardest? The $12 Goodwill suit, the 6 homes in Haiti, the Lance Corporal question, or the silence when Clinton had no answer left? Does this finally end the Clinton era for good, or will the machine launch one last desperate counterattack? If this analysis helped you see what really happened behind the headlines, smash that like button, share this video with anyone who follows politics seriously, and subscribe with notifications on. The fight for America's Forgotten is just getting started. I'll see you in the next chapter.